Yo, Adam, what is good? Sorry, that Spaces rugged me, man, for a second. So I stopped up the link. I fucking hate when that happens, man. When you're on the other phone, you have to set up the Emblem account. And it switched profiles last second. And I was like,
oh, dude, it's like you do all that stuff. Everybody signs up for it, and then it's like 2 seconds in, it rugs. I love that.
Oh man, it's just like BRC20, right? Getting rugged right as you get started.
Oh my god, we got so much to dig into. What an awesome space last night. It was really cool having Casey on the space last night. I mean, it was a big space. I don't know, spun up and 400 or 500 people in the space. Obviously, DGen's looking for the next big thing to draw interest. I mean, and here it is, man.
Here it absolutely is. Yeah, I got a lot of hot takes here. I think there's going to be a clear winner from this battle, and it's not going to be the Ordinals protocol. So we will dive we will dive into that.
Very interesting.
I'm going to let a bunch of people come on stage. I want to say some GMs. Businessman, what is good, man? This guy is a Rune hunter.
Does that already exist? He's created the entire space. He's going to rename himself Rune Hunter, bro.
I'm a Rune Hunter now.
Yeah, man. Chris, what's good, bro? GM.
Yo, GM. Feeling good. Love a bunch of the energy that all this is bringing back. It feels like it's kind of like reignited so much energy going back into Bitcoin, so much competition. So super stoked. Love where it's heading. Love people just creating, experimenting with new things. And so, yeah, I'm stoked on it.
Hell yeah. King Boo, what is good, bro?
Yo, what's good, Jake? What's up, y'all? I literally just woke up. I saw this space. I'm feeling controversial today.
Yeah.
The space has been like extremely fire. Like I felt the energy. It's been really fun. So looking forward. And we also have that inscription number debate later today at 1 p.m. PST. So
yeah, I thought the inscription number debate's now over. The community has moved on. Somebody had a great tweet was like, this was Casey's plan to take all the attention away from Ordinal's numbering. I was like, that's smart.
Oh, dude, it's great psyops. I don't know the intent. I just know that it's psyops. I just know that this motherfucker probably did it on purpose, knowing Casey. So we'll see.
Yeah, I talked with Domo last night. Domo messaged me like a few hours after the spaces, and he's also got some very interesting perspective on this. I invited him, so I hope he'll make it. If he doesn't, I'm gonna let him say what he has to, because I think it'll be pretty interesting once he posts what I think he's going to post.
Awesome.
Yeah, Adam, I want to take your first thought. I mean, you spun up the space alongside Tio. You were a co-host originally with Casey. To me, I'm going to present it in this way. I'm putting my tinfoil hat on. It felt very organized and pre-staged. I mean, from the sense that Casey puts his blog post out in 20 minutes. There's a spaces. 20 minutes into that, Cypher and the Ordinal Hub team said they're creating an indexer. And then 20 minutes after that, TO is offering $100,000, to the first Rune team building something. I don't know. It felt very inorganic. What'd you say?
The Trevor last part was sus.
Yeah. It felt like this is something that had happened or has been in the works for probably a few days to a few weeks already. Adam, what do you think?
Certainly possible. I mean, I always believe in the best of people. So I lean that way. And so, certainly I had zero knowledge of this ahead of time. So my gut did not get that feeling, but that's not to say that's not possible. And it's certainly not to say, because I'm sure Casey and those guys, Cypher and Charlie have had discussions about a better BRC20 protocol. I 100%. We've all had those discussions, right? So that is totally possible. And it does have that vibe of kind of the lead or developer, obviously Casey, wanting to move away from BRC20s. I mean, he's spoken out pretty publicly against it in the past. So it definitely has that vibe. And literally, if you re-listen to that space, my first question to Casey is, why, dude? right? If you are the most anti shitcoin guy ever, why? And his response was, pretty solid, which was basically, two things. One is like, well, if I don't do it, somebody else is going to do it. So it's like this kind of preemptive thing. And so if we're going to do it, let's do it the way that is best for Bitcoin in theory. But at that same time, and I didn't really challenge him on it because there were so many people wanting to speak and stuff like that. But if so, why not fully form the idea? Have other, high level devs like Sci4 look at this thing and actually build it out preemptively so that it's a fully formed idea rather than put out a blog post kind of half baked. And so in that way, that's kind of where I'm sitting on it, which is like, and I don't know. So I don't know where it is exactly. But I can understand that feeling from you because, that's definitely a possibility.
Yeah. I mean, it to me, it really clears the air that there was more to this inscription number debate than just the inscription numbers. First, he'd been socially attacking BRC20 for quite some time, for a few months now. And I think he realized that, you can't FUD degens because it only just reinforces the idea of what they're doing.
Yeah.
So now he's going to try to right curve it and deploy what he believes is, a technically superior kind of protocol. It's going to be tough. I think the question that I asked him yesterday really said it enough for me to what it says a lot about at least Casey, in my opinion, where the majority of that whole entire interview, he was on stage, everybody was asking him, very technical questions. He's a brilliant dev. He's a genius. It seems like he's really missing a lot of kind of this social capital idea. And so I proposed a question on his decision-making and said, hey, over the last few weeks, you've made some very controversial posts. You've also initiated some pull requests in the GitHub that you didn't vet anybody about. How do you go about, evaluating this social capital versus technical debt? Do you take the community into consideration when you're, proposing these type of ideas? And he basically responded and said, no, he doesn't. He said he did. He said it's just not something that
No thought, right? He just is like, no, I don't think about any of this stuff. I just do, right? Which is, that's really possible, right?
Mm-hmm.
We may be giving him kind of more credit, than warranted. Like he's some, most people don't, think 10 steps ahead. It's just not, people are not like that. And even somebody who's quite brilliant, like Casey, in a developmental, in dev work and, obviously blockchain and stuff, might not think about the social ramifications. And we've kind of seen that with, his CoinDesk interview and stuff like that, where he just flies off the seat of his pants and people love, current social media loves that. Right. So it may not be, there may not be some master plan. It just may be him flying off the hip. He's
absolutely winging it. I'm gonna call him BZ in a second, but I was talking with Bunzi yesterday. I'm on the OmniSat team, so there's probably some bias here and what I'm saying. But he's also in Vegas, so I'm gonna see him after this. They were kind of asking like why Casey would even go this far. Like I was really caught surprised that he create a competitor where it's kind of the situation of like, hey, degens, go play over here, go play in this other kind of land and get off my protocol. And I was like, Casey's been pretty controversial. The whole reason he stepped down is because, the maxi culture and like some of the people behind the scenes basically told him to cool it after that CoinDesk interview. And I tried to find that CoinDesk interview. I think they took it down, actually.
Oh, really?
That was one of the most wild interviews I've ever seen in crypto history, dude. That was that interview. If you could find that interview on CoinDesk with Casey, absolutely insane, dude. I think it really showcases kind of a little bit of, unhinged nature to it. So I guess we'll see, man. To me, it's this technical debt versus social capital conversation that is always, at the heart of most Bitcoin controversies. And there's definitely, authenticity to both sides. I think it just depends on if you could find a happy medium. Generally people don't. And we've seen what's happened the last few times. And I think this is kind of where this is leading to, but go ahead, BZ. I saw you had very spicy take this morning as well.
So what tape did you read?
The
Was
what-
it the
the-
one from?
Which one? He's like, I've had like 10. Which one, dude?
the one that I read, you said that this is only going to accelerate the adoption of BRC20.
Oh yeah, for sure. Well, I'm still excited about the fact that we have something called Runes now, right? By Casey, because like whatever engagement that happens in ordinals is probably just going to onboard more like users and more attention since it's on Bitcoin. So I'm actually pretty happy, regardless of what's going to happen with Runes. I think the reason I wanted to raise my hand was because I joined a Chinese Twitter space like this morning, because I just woke up and suddenly I saw, oh, I basically missed this whole announcement, because as soon as I slept, Casey basically posted his blog post about Runes. So I just woke up to a shitstorm, like kind of like chaotic Twitter. And the Chinese community was pretty interesting. I actually have a guy who translated some of their opinions for me. So I guess I could share you guys what he actually texted me, if you guys want to hear it, of course.
Please.
But yeah, so this is actually kind of my first time reading this because he just texted it. But he's basically saying this. Casey's tweet today was explosive news for our entire Chinese ordinals community. I've observed that after the new tweet was posted, multiple financial media outlets, and this is in Chinese, right, rushed to report on the matter, indicating that there is still significant interest in ordinals itself. Let me provide you with an analogy to convey our perspective. Imagine Casey was originally the king of a nation, and he had a son named Ordinals. Then Ordinals had a son of his own named BRC20. Under the governance of Casey's grandson, BRC20, the nation prospered. So the Chinese community really loves this, like BRC20, right?
Yep.
And people all around wanted to live in their country. However, recently Casey had another child with a different woman, and they named him Runes. Haha. In summary, Casey is an idealist, but the art gallery he created has turned into a playground for speculators, which has made him very uncomfortable. Not only has his art gallery transformed into a big casino, but Casey also holds a negative attitude towards fungible tokens itself. In this blog post proposing the Rune protocol concept, Casey concludes at the end of the article stating, the world of fungible tokens is almost irredeemable, filled with deception and greed. The proposal of Rune protocol concept can be seen as Casey's radical treatment for the Ordinals protocol, despite being its founder. However, in the world of Web3, he cannot unilaterally, yeah, exactly.
That's tough
Eliminate.
for everybody, man. Yeah, that one's a tough one.
Thanks, man. But yeah, he cannot like just by himself eliminate what he sees as the tumor, such as BRC20, which he believes is parasitic on the Ordinals protocol. So he presented this idea. This is the art gallery, and if you want to continue degen, I have an idea. How about everyone goes to the big casino? Degen, okay or not? So basically, well, the Chinese community is actually kind of upset about this, I assume. And I think what was concerning for me, at least, was the fact that with all this, with the renumbering of ordinals inscriptions, it's kind of concerning, right? That a person can, like the creator of Ordinals protocol, can have this much power. Contrast Satoshi Nakamoto, right? Where, well, that person or group does definitely not control what happens to Bitcoin. So I think, yeah, there's some general concerns in the space around this. But yeah, I just wanted to share this. Thanks, guys.
Dude, yeah, this is an incredible read. Casey is wielding a lot of his power. I mean, I would be pretty burned too if I had spent, the last 6 months, or I guess 4 months, or is it 5 months, building out on the BRC20 protocol, only for the creator of that underlying meta protocol of ordinals to say, hey, I am vehemently against this. I'm even going to go so far as to try to ostracize the entire community and manipulate them and move them to this completely different protocol that's not even ordinals. It's something else that's built off of Operaturn, which is what Counterparty was built on, which is what he also calls a shitcoin. Doesn't make sense, you know? It really feels like this, like, hey, kids, go play over here kind of situation.
Yep.
And you know, Unisat just raised, or at least the rumors that they raised at $50 million valuation. You think you're going to go get this team who just got, you know, who just raised from Binance to say, hey, let's flip the switches and go support this BRC20 protocol, or this Rune protocol? To me, it just feels very unlikely. And also, you know, Domo had just created the Layer 1 Foundation, and they're building, you know, I guess it's an on-chain indexer on Stacks, which is a cohort of OKX, Unisat. Who else is there? There's like 5 Best in Slot, and there's 2 other ones. That's a lot of power. You know, that's a team that is formed over the last 6 months to figure out the issues with this protocol. I think it's a big slap in the face to say, hey, everything that you guys have been working on over the last 6 months is basically bullshit, and you're going to use this instead, or I'm just going to openly attack your protocol consistently until you guys actually leave. And, you know, I'll get into a little later kind of where I think this is leading to, but, you know, I've been inferring it on my account for the last week or so.
Yeah.
Let's go, Boo.
So I'm bringing up the point earlier where you guys were talking about Casey just kind of does things and kind of has no plan, just does things on the whim. That's what it feels like for sure. But yesterday, they merged 2 Gits to the main org protocol, and it had people hella controversial because it's talking about how we should have consensus over before any changes, stuff like that. And understand that there has been $500 million put into the space in volume and liquidity. But at the same time, Ordinals was never discussed as being a DAO or a decentralized protocol. And if you go on the main site, it still says Ordinals Alpha. So I just wanted to take your guys' opinion on that.
Yeah, Adam, you want to take this one?
Decentralized, I think this is a tricky word, right? We see it all the time in the crypto space, right? And decentralized, when you have a strong leader like Casey, it's clearly not. I mean, it's just not. He can wield power over this protocol, and so I mean, that's the kind of the beauty of Satoshi disappearing, right? That in a lot of ways that covers up for things that are not great about Bitcoin. I tweeted about this morning, about that Satoshi has 1 million Bitcoin, right? We in the Bitcoin community, we don't even really talk about that, but that is a massive risk to Bitcoin. It's a massive risk to Bitcoin that Satoshi may be, a criminal, or the CIA, right? There are massive risks to Bitcoin that we kind of just gloss over with this immaculate conception idea of Bitcoin, right? And
it would be crazy.
And you're bumping up against, though, what with ordinals, what a strong founder can do. And so the reality is that the idea is decentralization, but with somebody who's so influential, it's basically his protocol right now, right? And the reality is this actually is a potential opportunity for the community to say, actually, you know what? This is ours now. That's actually a possibility, that if the community really wants to take control of ordinals, this may be an impetus and a possible kind of launch point to actually do that. I saw an earlier tweet today, it was a good one, about the founder of Dogecoin, right? Guy hates Doge, right? The community was just like, well, go screw yourself. You're out. And he was out. And Doge is, has this ecosystem now. Then
Wait, the founder of Doge hates his own coin?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, totally hates it.
What? That's crazy.
Yeah.
He left Doge for Adobe.
Yep.
Go on, Adam.
That's fake as fuck.
No, it's crazy. And so so in a similar way, the reality is that the community could, if enough people and enough groups with power want to, they can totally take ordinals away from Casey if they want to.
Yeah, the claim has been, at least from what I've read or listened to what Casey said, and Danny from On-Chain Monkey, and some of the Ordinal Hub guys, which they all seem to kind of be leveraging each other. They're saying that, this is Ordinals 0.9, and the whole idea of dropping the inscription numbers is so that it's finally Ordinals 1.0, and then it moves out of the beta stage, and then that's like the kind of like official stance. So I guess they're trying to get rid of all of that to, kind of, I guess, optimize the platform. The thing that confuses me too is he hasn't really stated what the intention is. Of course, he likes BRC20, but are all these like upgrades, quote unquote, for the reason to make ordinals more approachable to developers and institutions, right? Is he trying to move this past kind of this like retail stage and move this into this like more professionalized protocol to get, more liquidity and more type of interest? He hasn't really stated any of that. And this is why every time I'm on a space with him, I try to challenge him on his decision making. And it just seems like there is no process to it, honestly, which is, kind of unfortunate. But we'll go on to Dima and then Bugsy right after.
What's going on, guys? Thanks for having me up. Great conversation here. I just want to comment on a couple things on kind of the misunderstanding and the misuse of the word decentralized. The ORD client, that's what's decentralized. Mm-hmm. It's kind of like the Bitcoin Core client, right? That's built by a group of people, and like any BIP that needs to go through is decided by miners, okay? And that's like their own group. So like if you are partaking in the ecosystem, while it is you're free to run your own node, and that's the decentralized nature of it, right? Like if 100 nodes go down in China, like there's enough people running it that you're going to still have network connection. You're still going to have a currency and be able to transact. But the actual development of the Bitcoin Core is as decentralized as any other open source project, right? And ORD is just like another open source project. So there was never a claim that ORD is decentralized. Running the client is decentralized, and you deciding to choose the most popular ORD client that, supports BRC20 or doesn't or whatever, like that's kind of the choice that the community and the social consensus can make. Yeah, so kind of what you were saying, how, hey, maybe people don't like the directions that the Ordinal client is going, and maybe other people decide to fork it and do something that's better to expand upon BRC20s, because like you said, potentially $50 million to Unisat, and they're big on BRC20s. Maybe that's a future. But the only thing that is decentralized about ORD is the fact that like we're all running the client. We make it decentralized. But like the development of ORD, just like the development of Bitcoin Core, is as decentralized as any open source project. So like there's kind of I think a bit of a misunderstanding there. I also wanted to say, as far as BRC20s, it's almost a shame that it was the first thing that came out, because sometimes the first thing isn't the best thing. And I've spoken with Domo, and I think he's brilliant, and I'm happy that it became a thing. But guys, transfer inscriptions, the whole thing is so crazy. It is so impractical.
Dude, again, we have this discussion all the time. This is devs versus use case talking points, man. We don't need to go down this road. Like, I understand from a development standpoint, all devs say it's a piece of garbage, but doesn't matter. That doesn't matter.
From a user standpoint, having to transfer your BRC20 inscriptions is like the worst thing on this planet. Like, if you want to sell your BRC20s like in portions, like it could take you hours just to get it through. You got to inscription. Bitcoin wants to take.
I don't care if you put $200 million into it, right?
Well, like someone it's never cut the floor.
Yeah. So, anyways, fine. Yeah, that's been discussed ad nauseum. So
I mean, you know what I'm saying? It's like, look, dude, the keyboard sitting in front of your screen right now is the least efficient keyboard on Earth. Yet everybody on Earth uses it. All right.
Yeah, but the difference between
technologies that have mass adoption win. Period. Full stop. So I agree. Sure. The reality is you've got to not only build a better mousetrap, but then you got to convince a whole community of people to use that mousetrap. That ain't fucking easy, dude.
Fair. So what I would say is that my main gripe with Runes is that it doesn't run on Ord, because I think that the social consensus of everyone running Ord and that the decentralized nature of everyone choosing to run the same client, and the whole like XKCD standards meme really applies here, right? If everyone decides on a standard, it's much easier to just keep that fucking standard. I fully agree with that. I think that there is a better implementation that uses the Ord client that will allow some kind of shitcoinery. I don't know if Runes is it. I don't know if BRC20 is it. However, I do think that there is a possibility that whatever takes hold and is the best to use, there's no reason that you can't, like, I know Casey hates the word bridge, but I don't really know another term for it. A bridge to whatever the new client is. And yeah, I'm pro that if that happens.
Casey actually talked about on his space yesterday that he was thinking about including it in the Ord client, but it doesn't get hella complicated and there's no reason for it.
Yep.
So it's something they can do.
Randy, did you have something to say?
Ooh, some spicy ordinals wallet takes.
Yeah, I have a lot to say.
Summarize it in one sentence, bro. No, I'm kidding.
Ooh, it's gonna be yeah, good.
So the everything that OXDema said was I agree with. I gave you a follow, bro. That was good speech, bro. I will say that obviously we knew from the day BRC20 came out that it wasn't a practical fungible token standard, and that probably another one would need to be created in order for fungible tokens on Bitcoin to take off. Now, runes themselves are interesting. They're not nearly as decentralized and on-chain as BRC20. And I don't fully understand it. I'm not the guy who really has to understand all this stuff deeply, but I will, and I'm learning. I will say that you can't deploy and then have a fair mint on runes. You deploy all the tokens straight to a wallet, which is interesting, right? Because then whoever issues those tokens, if you were to just mint those tokens for $1 a pop, let's say right away, you're immediately getting into territory that is not necessarily, you might need a lawyer. Let's just put it that way. And that's an interesting take on tokens, right? Especially as a competitor to BRC20, because it's like dangerous. And I don't know. We have now ordinals, which is a way to like trace every Satoshi in existence, and now like runes from Casey, which is like kind of a sketchy way to deploy tokens from the perspective of the deployer himself, not the consumer. It makes me wonder if Casey is like some kind of government actor or something. I have no idea. It's possible. And so there's that take. There's that take for sure. And then the other thing is really just, people need to understand runes are not ordinals. This is an entirely different fungible token standard for Bitcoin. It's interesting, and because it comes from Casey, it's going to get a lot of attention. Yep. And we're interested in building on the next big thing on Bitcoin. So we're going to be messing around with this stuff. And the fact that we're the fastest and we're staying up all night just to build something on this, everyone's going to say that our stuff isn't the real stuff, right? We're already seeing Sci4 come out and say, oh no, this isn't the way you're supposed to do it. I'm going to write up a blog post.
It's like, how do I know what I'm supposed to do when it hasn't been built yet?
Right, exactly. It's like, well, actually, we can build it in any way, and probably our implementation is going to be the best because ours is usually going to be the most practical and the one that is geared towards the customer and what the customer's needs are and how the customer is going to use it in practical terms. So, we're going to fight that narrative battle of like, oh no, this one isn't the real one. Mine's the real one, because we're going to make the one that's the most practical and it adheres to the standards. So a lot of shit going on, a lot of drama. I don't really like the take that, hey, Casey wants to destroy BRC20. It's guys, BRC20 was built in a way that was just not really like a good for a fungible token. It's just not a great fungible token standard.
Yep.
Interesting. Yeah, I do want to come back to the kind of forecasting on what's going to happen next between this inevitable is code law or is KC law kind of situation. But I do want to call on the other hands first. So we'll go on to Bugsy and then Farmer Joe right after.
Yeah, thanks, guys. Oh, sorry, Adam. Do you want to say something before I go?
No, and then Trip Monkey right after Farmer. So go ahead.
Cool. Yeah. Yeah. No, I just wanted to obviously emphasize a couple things what Randy was saying, especially with the minting. OX Dima made a good point about the GitHub. I mean, it's not a blockchain, right? We love to kind of compare ORD to Bitcoin and nodes and such, but really it is a GitHub. And the more people that are running indexers, the more quote unquote decentralized it will be, right? I mean, even Satoshi in the beginning made arbitrary changes to Bitcoin without any permission because he was one of the only people running a Bitcoin node at the time. And then as that network grows, as more people index or run nodes for Bitcoin, it becomes harder and harder to make changes. So I think that was a great point. And I think we should just be more realistic on our expectations of GitHub code. Maybe there's a fork, but I mean, ideally, I would like to keep everyone in in consensus or like in agreement so that we don't like just have these like kind of alternate kind of hubs of people. It is odd that Casey's kind of trying to push BRC20s off of his quote unquote baby. That is kind of odd, and I think that's kind of his goal maybe. But I agree with Adam. I mean, at the same time, the liquidity kind of decides, and BRC20s aren't really going to be going away. I think people will still use them, and it is permissionless in that sense. So if they somehow push something that excludes BRC20 somehow, there would definitely be a fork of people that be like, what the fuck? Like we're definitely not leaving, and we're gonna keep doing this. I think it's funny that people are proposing different standards. I remember back in the day with ORC20 where they were proposing, where you can inflate the supply on demand if you were the issuer, and I thought that was pretty funny, and everyone kind of shit on it. So maybe that might be a downside. I don't see. I don't know. Like the mousetrap thing was also interesting. With you have to kind of convince people to go over there. So it's going to be interesting, and obviously we're talking about it, so it's raising a lot of questions. And yeah, thanks for having me. Sorry, that was a bit of a rant.
Let me just do one more take, and then I'm gonna let you guys go. But the other thing is that ORD client, first of all, I'm very strongly against getting rid of inscription numbers. I don't understand why. I don't think the trade makes any sense. Like, what are we trading away, and what are we getting in return? And it's just not really there for me. So I'm totally on Leonidas' side on this take, and we at Ordinal's Wallet are currently running some older version of ORD. And we can continue to do that. So like, it's really up to the builders and the service providers in the space to decide kind of what version of ORD they want to run. And we could potentially run on, version 0.4 or whatever we're on for a really long time. So
hey, Randy, is like I heard a lot about eliminating inscription numbers, and I don't think that was really the goal. They're just adding sequence numbers so that we can basically build on something that's quote unquote true to Bitcoin. So you can know the exact order of things that took place. I don't think this narrative of getting rid of inscription numbers is valid. I think that's a big misunderstanding. And I don't think they're going away. I don't think Casey's trying to get rid of them. That's not the case. So I've seen that kind of been happening around Twitter a lot and saying, do you want to get rid of inscription numbers or keep them? And that's not the argument at all here. So I don't know where that narrative came from.
Yeah, a lot of it's getting lost in the interpretation of I guess intention of why Casey wants to remove inscriptions. This is why I kind of proposed a little bit ago. Is they haven't really discussed why, right? Are they trying to scale this past retail to be, more of a commercial type of thing and for developers, or is it just because they hate BRC20? Is it because this, this idea of a junk UTXO or spamming the blockchain, which also always seems to be kind of at the center of controversy. I mean, Adam, we just saw BRC20 in the stamps community go through this. What was that, like 3-4 months ago?
Yeah, it was probably like 4 or 5 months. Yeah, somewhere around that. Yep. I mean, we actually saw the numbering issue that ordinals are dealing with. Like that happened in the stamps community, like week 1. They recognized, holy cow, we've got some stamps here, which technically probably should be stamps. We're not 100% sure, but we think we should include them. And it's going to require a reorg of numbers. And there were people obviously with 69 and 420 or whoever were going to be impacted, and, but they made, Mike and them were just like, you know what, we got to bite the bullet, and it's better to bite it now than kick down the can down the road, which I advised them to at the time. Cause it was just made sense. Smaller community, less pain, couple of people impacted, and they made that switch early, and it was the right thing to do. And I think, again, it's like we were talking about this in April, and Ordinals has now kicked it down the road again, and it's more pain. And it's almost like now it's to the point of inaction because it's so painful to try and fix this. And it's a bit of a bummer. But what are you going to do?
Yeah. Also, the early days of ETHscription, we also had this with Tom when we were helping. Exactly. Emblem was helping with ETHscriptions. I think it was literally like the second day there was an issue with numbering, and Tom didn't even ask community. He just went ahead and make the executive decision when there was only a few hundred people there.
Yep.
Very tough. Farmer Joe, bro, what is your thoughts here? Are you a Rune maxi now?
Yeah, hell yeah. I'm so here's the thing. All right, listen. At the end of the day, we're still using Bitcoin, right? Like, and I think this is where we have to decide: are we ordinals maxis or are we Bitcoin maxis? And by having this limitation of ordinals not be able to do tokens properly, or at least up until this day, having kind of a separate team or a separate focus angle to focus on fungible tokens on Bitcoin is actually going to be a net positive for Bitcoin in itself. And I think the one thing that people don't understand is we're still on Bitcoin. Like your Xverse wallet and all the wallets that you're using, eventually you will have applications and websites that are going to be interoperable or running both clients at the same time. And the user experience is not going to feel like you're bridging off of an ordinals community or an ordinal specific product. It's all just going to be one front end. That's the way I see it. I think what Casey, is where he's coming from is he doesn't want to keep this consideration from a development angle to really have to appease both sides of the market. He built Ord as a non-fungible kind of protocol, and that's his area of expertise and his focus. And he really just doesn't want to upkeep the ordinals client to flexibility that allows for tokens. And where he's coming from, I understand. And this Rune standard that he's proposing is kind of, another direction where other teams that are more capable of developing on it can do the right things and create something that is much more fluid. And, I talked to Domo actually literally 2 days ago. We had like an hour-long conversation, and he was telling me like, hey, like, I think BRC20 is here to stay for now, but I don't know if it's going to be here forever. Anything new has to basically do things significantly better. And I posted this yesterday, but it's comical that one tweet from Casey and you already have more developers developing on Rune than you ever had on BRC20.
I don't think that's true. I don't think that's true.
Well, okay. I'm probably stretching the truth a little bit. But now you have Ordinal's wallet. They were the first ones, and I think people are trying to discredit them a little bit to inscribe the Rune token. They pre-mined the whole supply, and all the governance tokens are now in their team. So yeah, they basically run the protocol, and it's their protocol as far as I can see. Right, Randy?
I agree with you, Farmer Joe. I think, if you have a few people kind of look at the specs, and if they've deployed the exact code of what was presented in that blog, then, you know, it becomes this idea, which is actually kind of an interesting situation where it's this first is first, right? Kind of idea, which is what BRC20 and what ordinals has historically ran off of from the social consensus type of idea. Or is it this kind of block height thing where they say Casey has to determine when the protocol is going to be activated at this block height, and that's where you get the like, right? Casey, is it Casey's law or is it code law?
Yeah, I'm of the view that it's code law. Like, we're using Bitcoin, so let's stop this whole madness that we're creating this like layer 2 protocol of validity or non-validity. Like, everything on Bitcoin that is first, it should you know, be true to Bitcoin in itself. And maybe that's kind of like the code maxi in me talking, but I don't think that we should necessarily have these like activation layers, because then we start getting into, you know, this whole concept of, you know, are we a layer 2? How do we decentralize governance? And so it's open source, and it's on Bitcoin. So let's just keep it simple and keep it classic. Now, the other thing that you guys talked about is kind of the pre-minting of tokens. Now, I understand the BRC20, you know, objective, and I guess how it worked on ordinals is you mint in a fair launch perspective. And obviously that was a cool methodology. But I think if you look at how tokens are done on any other chain, you know, functional, actual utility tokens and tokens that accrue value over time, none of these tokens are inscribed to own products. They're either distributed through, you know, incentive mechanisms or actions of users or teams that raise money and distribute it to co-investors and you know, eventually to users. And so I think Runes is really more true to how tokens should be done in the longer duration of time. I get it. Everyone wants to pump their bags and inscribe things for free and make off like a bandit, but that's not really how tokens work. So
well, that I might push back a little bit on you there, because I mean, I think I pinned it actually in the comments. You can see it there from Bugsy, and he wrote, you know, fair mint greater than pre-mine. And I think, you know, one of the great things about BRC20s was this kind of innovative approach to minting of tokens, you know, and I think I don't think it's
I agree with you there, but here's the counter argument. Like, that it came at a time where there wasn't necessarily a lot of eyeballs, and so it felt a lot more first is first and free at the time. Now, when you have tens of thousands of users all chasing this same mint, you know, then we're not really going to have a fair launch, right? It's just going to be who's going to set their highest fees on the transaction and who's going to just ape into a launch more than others. And you know, the distribution mechanics just don't work when you have hundreds of thousands of people looking at the exact same thing, chasing a free mint or a free launch. And so while it works when things are small, when things are, you know, at scale like we have right now, it doesn't necessarily work, or at least you have to modify the distribution mechanics to make it feel more fair, right? That's my perspective on it. And BRC came at a time when no one was looking and everyone thought it was kind of, maybe this is nothing. But obviously, you know, we have a very different take on Runes, where everyone really does see, you know, the potential in this. And, you know, the moment that a free mint is possible and is live, it's not going to feel like a fair launch, because there's going to be a high concentration of whales that are going to be noticing this opportunity, and that would ape in, like myself and a bunch of people here, honestly.
Well, I mean, I'd say I hear what you're saying. And it's something, it's funny. I mean, we're having this discussion as part of the reason I put out that kind of video today. It's like the idea of what is a fair launch, what's a distributed launch. And you could say, okay, well, I don't know, Litecoin was a fair launch, right? Like anybody could go mine it right at the beginning. It was like enough people knew it was going to happen, but the number of people who were ready to mine it were like 5 people in the world. You know what I mean? And so it's like, I'd almost push back and say, like, look, the SATS BRC20 launch is like possibly the fairest launch ever, because it took like 6 months to mint out. And you know what I'm saying? I'm not saying we're done, and I'm not saying like this is the best way to fairly distribute like tokens. Like I think we're still years away from like the next best thing, but I just want to lean in a little bit to like the kind of innovative nature of this, where it does allow a bit more fairness than kind of, these pre-mined
Yeah, but Jake, like I
This is
understand your point.
but yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
sorry.
It's Adam. We're on a live stream.
Jake's like, I would never say that. That's Adam's terrible take.
No, Adam. Like I think SATS is obviously a very fair launch, but you also have to keep in mind, like if SATS had a lower supply, for example, then it would have a lower market cap. And the reason why it felt fair is because it was very accessible. But then from a holder's perspective, you have to accept that this thing is launching at a $50 to $100 million market cap, from a token perspective, based on the fees that it takes to mint it out. Again, like, just a counter argument to this. But yeah, like that's the way that I'm seeing it. If it was like extremely free to inscribe, SATS, let's call it like a penny per transaction, this thing would be gone within, I would say 5 minutes.
Sure.
Yeah. So Casey actually came out during that Spaces yesterday. He is not a fan of the decentralized first type of mint style. He did say that on the Spaces. We're gonna go Trip Monkey, OX Dima, and then Shubba and BZ. Jeez, a lot. Let's keep it going, guys.
All right, I'll try and make it quick. So thank you for giving me a chance to come up. Can you guys hear okay?
Yeah.
Yeah, we got you, man.
Okay. All right, thanks for giving me a chance to talk. A little bit of background. So I've been doing software development a long time, probably on the older side of the demographic, and very much on the outside looking in. So please don't take anything as like a judgment thing, but it's really a request for a little bit of education. Because, if I go back to like the late 90s, early 2000s, and a lot of the development I was doing there, there was this really real thing called DLL hell, where like all these dynamic link libraries were versioned, and there was dependencies, and it was just a mess to get software running because of all of the dependencies and things that you had to go through. And a lot of importance to versioning and semantic meanings behind the version numbers and everything became very important in the software development world. And like I have seen that this whole ordinals thing's on like a 0.9. And one of the big things about making our major increment to the 1.0 is it needs to, from there until 2.0, everything has to be backwards compatible. So figuring that stuff out now is probably what's driving a lot of this. But like knowing that it's kind of labeled alpha software and it hasn't had a 1.0 release right now, like what kind of blows my mind is we're figuring this stuff out on mainnet, where people who have way less of an idea of what's actually going on under the hood. I'm putting my paycheck into like alpha software. To me, from the outside looking in, that's not the coolest of vibes, right? So, like, could you explain to me like why all of this alpha and pre-alpha and pre-1.0 development is being done on mainnet, where the instinct is to build on it as quickly as possible, get it in front of a customer as quickly as possible, so that you can make money as quickly as possible, as opposed to doing this stuff on a test net where we can do this with, make-believe money and not put people's funds at risk.
Oh, go ahead, Bugsy. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I was just gonna say you're preaching to the choir, obviously. But the fact is, it was released, right, and a lot of money was put into it, so that it's hard to be like, hey, all that, $500 million you spent on fees and buying these things. Yeah, like we're just gonna scrap that and start over, right? It's a little bit more nuanced than that. But sorry about that, Jake.
No, you're good.
Appreciate it. That's just where, like, to me, that's where the discussions should be. Like, how do we handle release management? How do we handle versioning? How do we handle dependencies? How do we handle this? And doing that on a test net before we rush everything up to the main net and get everybody else involved.
Yeah, Trip. I mean, I would say just there's a few components to it. One of it's kind of just that's how it's been culturally done since the beginning with Bitcoin, right? It was launched in this kind of like beta, stage, but people still decided to invest money into it. Also, really, in my opinion, what really runs crypto is network effects. And if you've seen historically, the first to market in this space is generally the winner. Bitcoin was the first cryptocurrency. Ethereum was the first smart contract platform. Monero was the first privacy currency, right? CryptoPunks wasn't first, but they were in that first kind of area of getting cultural relevancy. And so if you can get this kind of, this breakaway network effect, then you're generally going to win, and you could fix it, as you're kind of flying the plane, which is basically what Ethereum is doing. And they said the merge, right, was basically upgrading the plane while flying it. And I think a lot of users see that, and you just try to model it after that because that's what's been historically done. And, one case I would show, which is really this idea of, hey, let's test things versus let's just throw stuff at the wall and use this as a playground and see what happens, is Ethereum versus Cardano, right? They're both two different people who are co-founders of Ethereum. Cardano wanted to go through this academic model of testing things before pushing it to mainnet. And they've just historically fallen way, way behind of where Ethereum is today. And I think a lot of users really look at that and say, hey, I don't want to be Cardano. I want to be, I want to be the first to market. And that's where you see this race.
No, I can appreciate that. And I'm coming from the point of, this is my first real kind of cycle being involved. I work in software consulting, and a lot of clients, well, until they completely pivoted to AI, are talking about blockchain and build, and they're, to some degree, they come to the big consulting firms first because the big consulting firms are already in there, and dealing with something like ordinals, like when you're dealing with an ordinals wallet or like maybe Unisat, and this kind of discussion is one thing, but when you have someone like a Nike committing funds to building on something like that, like there needs to be a little bit of, either they're going to have to train to adapt to the culture, or the culture is going to have to train to adapt to the big corporations if you want that big money to start moving in. So it'll be an interesting thing to watch.
That's a very valid point. And welcome to the community, man. It only gets crazier from here. So I hope you're ready. A lot of things don't really make sense because it's just because this, the whole entire crypto industry is purely digital space. It's really, I would say, probably the first, maybe outside of the meme economy, that really only exists on the internet. And now it's trying to find its way into the real world. So a lot of things are really backwards, and you have to think about a different kind of paradigm that's existing here. But really, really good point. Call on Dima and then BZ afterwards.
Hey, thanks again. Just wanted to comment on a few things. So DLL hell, that throws me back to my first software co-op. It was a C++, C#, like Windows application, dev job, and fuck, DLL hell is a real thing. Trying to write an installer when you're, some kind of like, early 2000s, late 90s piece of software, and you're not really sure which DLLs are included or are actually necessary. That brings me back. I did want to say something that I was trying to bring up in the my first speech, but it was I forgot about it because I have a lot of things to say. I think it was Jake or Adam. You were saying the point that the future of ordinals, at least from Casey's perspective, hasn't been entirely clear to you. I guess
that was me. Yeah.
What he's spoken about, but I actually kind of disagree. He's on record so many times said that like digital curios, digital artifacts, that is what
That's what he built it for.
But that's
as
getting
well as-
lost in his own terminology, though, right? You can create your own, terminology for a protocol and say this is where it's going, but that's not clearly defined to those people who didn't create the protocol of what the intention is here.
Right. But I mean, in regards to the future of what they're doing with ORD and why they're getting rid of inscription numbers, or not getting. Sorry, I know that's a contentious thing to say, but maybe adding a sequence number. The reason for all these features and anything that is kind of getting pushed in as a PR on ORD right now is to make the digital artifact ecosystem better. Like, they want to have collections, real collections with JSON metadata. That way you can define traits, which, if anyone who's coming from F, like, traits are sick. You want to know how many of your frogs have a fucking McDonald's hat on. It's important, okay? It's an important part of PFPs, and even just like something that even is more like fine art, some kind of generative fine art. You want some kind of metadata on there. So that's what they're pushing for. Same with like the provenance with parent-child. Like, every single PR right now is trying to push the ability to do more with digital artifacts. Unfortunately, that does not include like optimizing BRC20s right now, because obviously that's I think a bit of a bastardization of what it was built for. Even if I like BRC20s, and even as a dev, if I think it's like ridiculous, and I do like them, I love any type of innovation where you're given a very small set parameters and you try and build something that is bigger than the sum of the parts. I love that idea, and I think BRC20s is that, right? It's like, okay, we're only given this, but we can somehow build fungible tokens, even though this is not meant to build fungible tokens. That's why I commend Domo, and also just anyone trying to build something innovative that is inside of ORD that isn't exactly digital curios. But they had to have known, or at least I think it's becoming clearer, that the whole point of ORD is to push collections, digital art, digital artifacts. That seems to be what the core development team has on the roadmap. If you look at like the open GitHub issues, that's what they're kind of pushing toward, to maximize the ability and the features that you can do with digital artifacts. And you need provenance, you need metadata, and getting rid of inscription numbers or not supporting them officially, I think is the right thing to say, will make their jobs easier to do all those things, like multiple inscriptions on the same set, things like that. That's kind of where they're going. I think they've been clear about that, in my opinion. Anyways, love the conversation. Let's keep going.
Just to quickly chime in, I think you can be clear about something and create something with an intention, but other people can push it in a different direction. And if it still works within the rules of that protocol, then I don't see an issue. Even with these new sequence numbers that they pushed, I don't think it breaks BRC20s or anything like that. So if we want a permissionless system, then I don't like, you can frown upon, but they'll still exist, and people are still gonna kind of use it right in the way that they. And that's all I say.
Yeah, I think that's the beauty of these sort of systems, right? Is that their best laid plans is we're making it for art and artists, and everybody's like, screw that. It's better for shit coins, and then they lose control of it in that way. I mean, that's kind of the beauty of it. I do appreciate. I wanted to point out to the guy who just stepped down, the guy who was like, how do you? He's new in the space. Anytime you hear somebody pronounce ETH as eth, know that person's been in the space since 2015. So that's a so Odima, I appreciate your pronunciation of eth, and you're obviously an OG. Welcome.
Yeah, I definitely hear the first pronunciation, and I just it's impossible for me to unstick it. And I've been called out for that so many times, by the way. And
no, so it's the mark of an OG, man. Don't ever give it up.
It's a Canadian thing. I just want to say, I think it's like a sad Z thing. I think F is a Canadian thing. One more thing I want to say, Bugsy. The whole reason why I said, fuck, I think BRC20s are ridiculous, but the fact that they were able to build that on top of ORD, whatever you can build on top of ORD, I support. I love the idea. Fuck, let me give like an example, okay? Like if anyone's done music production ever in their lives, if you go to like what are they called?
digital audio workstation, a DAW, okay? And you want to build a song with like a synthesizer. There's so many options. There's almost too many options, right? It is such a wide number of knobs and tools and things you can build. Whereas if you have like an amplifier and 2 guitar pedals and like 1 signal, you can make something so much more innovative by being in such a small box. If you understand the analogy I'm trying to make, limiting yourself to just the ORD envelope and what you can build on it is so much, and knowing everyone's going to run ORD is so much more enticing to me than kind of doing like, oh, let's build another indexer for runes. That's why I don't like runes. The whole reason I don't like it is because it's not using ORD. I think everything should be crammed into what ORD is, and we should just innovate on top of that as best we can. Anyways,
yeah, I think that's well said, and I agree. Like, splitting up a group of people into 2 and then 4 and 8, I think that really like affects the liquidity that will be drawn into those systems. So I agree. If we can have an umbrella of ORD and have everything in it, and still be nice to each other and figure out ways to interact with each other without having these crazy vendettas against each other, that would be awesome. I fully agree with that.
Yeah, it's a it's a good idea. Fragmentation only leads to a loss of community members, a loss of developer activity. It generally does not go well. I mean, think about this: if you're in Domo situation, what do you do? Do you continue building on ORD where the creator is hostile to your protocol and is now creating competing protocol that's built on a different type of foundation? So do you stay there and try to build it out, or do you go make your own protocol? Or you say something like, hey, I'm going to fork ORD, the 0.9, because it's still in beta, and then I'm going to add these type of upgrades to it to make BRC20 compete so that it can compete against runes in its own form, to where, I can't be attacked or, make the protocol not benefit, this type of fungible standard. Because, when new fungible currencies are created, it is going to get some sort of adoption, and this is going to be a competition. I don't see it any other way. At least right now, it does not seem like a friendly type of thing that's been proposed. At least what this was doing, right? Casey is very aware that whatever he puts out, people are going to go build it and people are going to go ape it, right? So the question is then, do people ape Rune and some of these new protocols and then, take the money and funnel it back into BRC20s? Or do they say, hey, I like this new shiny object and I'm just going to stay here? But it is also very dependent on the type of infrastructure that could be spun up, right? I think what's going to happen is you're going to see a lot of people ape Rune, right? Whatever Randy you guys do over at Ordinal's wallet, and then whatever the competitors do. And you're going to realize there's like 2 marketplaces that are supporting this, or you have this infrastructure of, dozens or maybe 5 or so wallets that support BRC20. You have all these marketplaces that support BRC20. And so I think it's going to be kind of interesting, but I'll propose that question. We'll come back to it later. I'll go on BZ, Overlord, then Nilly.
Yeah, thank you. And I just wanted to shout out first of all, like Bob Bodley, because I can see he's here. Like, thank you so much for writing the whole long post about BRC20 versus Rune's comparison, because that really helped me today when I had to write for Ordinals Global. Ordinals Global is also a speaker, but I'm the one who's controlling it. So it's just to attract more people to the space, and of course, like, piggyback on the engagement farming. But actually, the thing I wanted to go into is I was actually really curious when you mentioned that we can just the community can basically go against Casey and just, I don't know, like, are you expecting that we are able to fork ordinals, or what did you mean that we could take control over the ordinals, like the community could take control over the ordinals protocol? Because as I see it, if you're referring to forking, I don't think it's very unlikely that would be successful, simply because I think you would have to rally Magic Eden, Unisat, Ordinals Wallet, Xverse, like all those marketplaces, right? Like, and wallets in order to do that, because we already know that Bitcoin Classic didn't work, Ethereum Classic, like all those previous forks in crypto never really got adopted, like which was from the community. So what did you actually mean? Like, how could the community basically take over control in the sense that it could be the Ordinals protocol could become more decentralized in terms of where the power lies instead of just like one centralized person?
Yeah, I think Adam and I both had differing ways to go about it. I'll go with mine, then I'll let Adam go right after. My thought is, with Bitcoin or Bitcoin Cash, the fork, it failed because there were miners who moved over, but the developers didn't. If you're Domo, right, we're just speaking in case of a fork here. They're already creating, or they already have a cohort of 5 different entities who have these indexers spun up: OKX, Unisat, Best in Slot, and there's somebody else, right? So I think at least from a business perspective, right, if I'm operating Unisat, it's going to be much easier for me to just add whatever the new fork is with a few upgrades than it is to integrate this entire new protocol. Like, Adam and I've been at Emblem for now a year, and development is tough. It is a lot easier to add a few different tweaks than it is to basically build this whole entire protocol that has no liquidity, where BRC20 has $300 million of historical activity. So just putting on my pure business hat on, if I were these types of protocols like OKX and stuff, it's already easy to do this because they're also dedicating resources to building this on-chain indexer. And now Domo also has this cohort of other meta protocols who are also joining on. So I think it's, a much easier way to kind of flip that switch. If there is a case of a fork, that's just speaking hypothetically. In that case, I think Adam had a different approach without a fork.
No, I mean, I'm on a similar wavelength to you. I mean, there are lots of different ways it could happen or go about happening. And we've seen it happen just with the numbering, right? It's such a contentious issue. And there was even talk early on before Casey kind of finalized the idea of cursed ordinals. There were some high level devs who were like, if you don't do it, well, guess what? We're going to spin up a new indexer, and maybe that's going to be the indexer people use and create a rift in the community. Doesn't necessarily have to be a hard fork, but splinter off the community and splinter off attention. And we see that all the time in crypto. When you splinter attention, things can go really, really bad. So I think in a lot of ways, it's good in that it provides this this kind of carrot or stick to have Casey act and Casey and the core kind of devs act in a way that's kind of, they have to listen to the community, because if they act so inappropriately, the community does have that power to kind of use different mechanisms to kind of do what they want. So yeah, I don't think we're anywhere near that. It's just, it's there. This is like, I mean, it's kind of the reason why we haven't had a final kind of done on Cursed, is that maybe it's because the community got so big so quick that movement couldn't take place. While with stamps or inscriptions or whatever, it was 50 people, and the devs kind of felt powerful enough just to do it. So I don't know. Yeah.
I want to add to, before we call on Overlord, I think a fork is probably the worst case scenario. I do think the BRC20 community has a lot of leverage in this situation. And personally, I think that the decision-making by Casey to even propose this is one of the worst leadership decisions I've seen in quite some time. I just do not think this is going to end well for the Ordinals protocol. But go ahead,
Jake. I don't know how much time Bob has. We might want to get to Bob real quick. I think he had to scoot out of here. But
yeah, I would love to hear what Bob has to say. And first, I'd also appreciate you for always putting out these technical protocols. I've commented now with the Batman Bob signal meme 3 times, and you have not responded to it 1 time. I'm really offended.
I haven't seen any of those tweets. Maybe you're like shadow banned in my replies or something.
Rude.
I'll need to go through your profile and just like all your tweets so the algorithm knows that I really appreciate Jake's content. No, I mean, I'm sure you guys already talked through the majority of things. I mean, last night was a really fun time. It's been a while since we've had a good race to the first is first implementation. That felt pretty good. I know lots of people were pushing on it, and I know lots of people made lots of progress early on in the night. Just trying to digest the blog post, and then later on, I mean, there are some pretty interesting decisions that you have to make as a developer trying to implement the Runes protocol based on Casey's blog post. I mean, all we have is a blog post. We don't have a spec. We don't have a reference implementation. Like, this was not the most ideal circumstances to start a dev race to, create the first token, the first rune. But I think at this point, I think someone has created the first one. I don't know which one it is because it depends on how the protocol is defined. I know some people were, trying out like 3 or 4 or 5 different ways just in case the protocol was defined and differently. And I know some people have made better decisions. I guess what I mean is there are, like, when you create an indexer or when you're doing something like this, creating a new protocol, there are all of these weird decisions you have to make. One of them is, for example, Casey mentioned in the blog post, and this was one of the comments on my tweets, but you have to decide how you're going to encode the ticker, which is the symbol. And it says a base 26 implementation, similar to how sat names work, except sat names is weird because it counts down instead of counting up. And it doesn't use a = 0 base 26. It uses a = 1 base 26. And so depending on the base 26 conversion that you use, your ticker might be HM or your ticker might be GL. It just depends on how the encoding works. So that's one wrinkle that, like, who would ever think about this wrinkle in a protocol or in a blog post until we actually have like a reference implementation. And there was one other one where it was regarding like the actual encoding of the integers, which I think it makes the most sense to just use the Bitcoin native way of encoding varants. I know that's what UTXO Detective at Ordinal's Wallet was doing. That approach makes a lot of sense to me. But it wasn't clear from Casey's blog post exactly how the encoding of those integers was supposed to work. So anyway, quite the party.
Yeah, to say the least, Bob. To say the least. I don't really know what's going to happen here. There's going to be a lot of battles, I think, over the next week, at least internally, for the Rune protocol to decide what's the right implementation and sorts. But I'm going to be looking for your technical write-ups so that I can really understand it from a smooth brain perspective. Go ahead, Bob.
Yeah, I was just going to say one more thing. It's kind of crazy, but it's almost like whoever gets the first indexer, whichever marketplace gets the first indexer has a lot of sway in what the protocol actually looks like. Potentially. There's also, I mean, starting out this messy is kind of a problem because I know lots of people are pushing on this. Let's assume someone pushes out an indexer and there's a marketplace and people start trading runes, and then Casey decides that he wants to have an opinion on the specifics of the Rune implementation, and now he actually releases a spec. And let's say the spec is in conflict with what has already been implemented, and now you have this messy scenario where we're already in a place where we have, multiple implementations of the Rune protocol, and people have already put money into certain tokens. So I don't know. We're kind of treading on shaky ground here by building fast before we've had some more information around the actual protocol specification.
Yeah, completely agree. Well said. Go ahead, Overlord.
Hey, just some high-level thoughts, and I'm still catching up like everyone else, so my apologies if I get any of the nuances wrong. But, just the community rift, the sort of will Rune displace BRC20 discussion overall. My thoughts are that we all kind of agree that this is catering to the shitcoin market. That's an interesting proposition trading directly on chain. for many reasons. Even, the DEXs on Ethereum are a bit too slow for true high frequency trading and stuff that market makers can do on CEXs. So the way I see it is that if it's almost like the winner will be determined by what the CEXs really adopt and push, because that will be, for this particular type of coin, in my opinion, will be the sort of driver of adoption and volume. And so I do wonder what it looks like out there for the current BRC20s who may be relying on similar sort of functionality, if you will, and whether they're going to move into the Rune system, or if anyone's heard any plans for anyone that's going to convert over, or if any of that's already been sort of brought up yet, or TBD.
Yeah, I would say a lot of this is really TBD at the end of the day, right? We're still trying to figure out what's the real Rune. There's already a lot of conflictions of people debating what's the right way. Right now, I think, again, we're probably going to have this conversation maybe later today or sometime in this next week. Is code law? Is it what Ordinal's wallet deployed is the first Rune, or is it what Casey says at X block height activation? That'll be
No, Jake,
that'll be interesting.
It's not his code law. It's his blog post law. That's where we're at. Everyone has to remember that.
Yeah. Also, this is what, 24 hours old. I mean, right? Like we're literally chasing the next shiny object right now. So I think obviously those questions are yet to be seen. And I think like a competing standard, it can't be just a little bit better than the existing one. It has to be 10x, 100x better than the current implementation for all of that liquidity to move over. So I think that's something that we'll have to be kind of looking out for.
It's a very, very, very valid point. Go ahead, Nilly. What is good? Good to see you. If you guys don't know, Nilly was one of the OGs of the colored coins back in the early days. One of the true pioneers on Bitcoin for a long time.
Thank you, Jake. Nice to be here. So I want to bring first the female voice, which we seem to have less and less around. Even just the pitch. So that was the first thing. And then actually it's also, I guess, the female voice in other aspect. And also the maybe older and wiser a little bit. Wiser in terms of having a lot of experience in the space through the times. So when I was creating my tokens back in 2014, my main, one of my ideas thought was that it is a token over Bitcoin. It's over the Bitcoin network, and thus, no matter what happened with the protocol, it can totally die. Okay, no, it can be no one would run it, but in the minute one node would run it, my tokens will come alive again. So as long as Bitcoin exists, every side chain, every protocol that is based on Bitcoin can come to life again. So this goes also for the discussion about the forks. It's not like the fork, like the Bitcoin fork, that in the minute you fork, you have miners mining one chain, the other miner mining the other chain, and you can't have those transactions ever recorded on, like the fork transaction ever recorded on the original chain. This does not happen with all the side chains or with layer 2 or whatever you call it, because in the minute you run the protocol, you got a transaction on the protocol, and those transactions are being transmitted to the main Bitcoin protocol at some point. If not directly right away, then it can be every few transactions or whatever. But eventually it finds its way to the Bitcoin protocol, and this protocol keep the ledger keep being alive. And whenever you jumpstart the other protocol again, you are starting at the point that you ended. So it's almost like if we'll take it we'll think a few years ahead. Eventually, all protocols, older one as a counterparty, and the newest one would be able to be run on one application that would basically run all those protocols, and all those tokens from all different protocols would be able to exchange with each other. That, as long as Bitcoin keep alive, all those protocols can interact with each other and revive and live together, and nothing is going to go lost.
Got it. So Nili, so basically what you're saying is, looking at this on a longer time frame, it's probably healthier for the Meta Protocol ecosystem to spin their protocols off of ordinals into kind of their own single standing kind of protocol.
Basically, what I'm saying, the more variety we have, the more options or discoveries we'll have, and it doesn't take away from the original one. Right now it does, but in a while it's not, because it would be really easy to run all those protocols and keep every asset alive based on the protocol that it was created, because everything runs on Bitcoin.
Again, yeah.
Is it understood?
Yeah. I mean, I agree. It makes sense. So you're saying it's different from Bitcoin because there aren't miners that are going to be affected based off of if ordinals is forked. We'll use BRC20 for example. If they fork Ord client and create their own BRC20 self-sustaining kind of client, the miner fees are still going to be transacted. Miners are still going to be paid the same amount unless there's some sort of optimization, but it'll be the same. And having a more variety of more self-standing meta protocols on Bitcoin is healthier for the ecosystem long term than all of these trying to exist in this kind of like all of these existing on ordinals where there's kind of this turmoil that exists. You get that right?
Right. And maybe for a while, some of the market going to move away from one protocol to another, and then you may consider this old protocol almost as dead, but those assets still exist in the minute you run this protocol, so it can always revive itself, and it can being utilized then for different things. So what I'm saying, it's not as critical as a fork, and it's actually, as you say, healthy for the ecosystem to be free to do many things which are less consequences than a fork is. And if an asset has a value for whatever reason, it can retain this value along the a long time, maybe even as historical asset in the end.
Yeah. Adam, what do you think about Nili's take? Right, we've studied the history of Bitcoin. We've seen all these protocols pop up. Do you think it's healthier long term to have all of these individualized into kind of self-sustaining meta protocols? Turn your mic up a little bit.
Sorry, man. It's certainly, my dogs were barking. I had my head. Certainly, Nili's point about being built on Bitcoin is solid. I think we all agree with that. I think that's the differentiator. But these could be forgotten. I mean, this is the thing, right? If the communities kind of go away and 20 years, I mean, we talk in 100-year timeframes and stuff like that. But no, let's not fool ourselves. Keeping people's attention for that long requires more than just small bag bias in the short term. Like, it requires a complete movement of people towards something that's meaningful over the long term, and that's really, really hard to do. But that it is built on Bitcoin, what has the best option or the best possibility is of lasting long term, I think Nili's got that right.
It's almost like standardizing, right? It's like ERC20, ERC721, ERC 1155 here. You can have BRC20, BRC21, BRC2022, and they all exist.
I mean, yeah, I think you had the best take earlier today, which is like, oh, is this counterparty? It's like, well, thank God for Pepe's, right? Pepe's have kept counterparty alive to a large extent, right? But the thing is, it never really truly dies, right? It can always be brought back. And so we've seen that. Saw that with Doge Party. And so there is that. But yeah, I don't know. It's a good take by Nilly.
It is a really, really good take. What's good, XCO, man? Have you agreed with any of my takes during this conversation?
Brother, man, when we're talking about runes, I'm still like, I'm just watching with popcorn, you know what I'm saying? And I'm just like, this is fascinating stuff, you know what I'm saying? But here's the thing, man. What I wanted to say is, and by the way, the lady who explained her points, I think, they're very interesting, intriguing ideas. Digbot protocol, actually solves a particular Digbot protocol is on tap protocol, by the way, but I call it Digbot protocol. Now, solve something that Bob Bodilli, I hope I'm pronouncing his name the right way. I don't know, if it's Bodilli.
Say Bob. Yeah.
Is it Bodilli or Bodilli?
Nobody knows.
Oh.
It's like bodily harm or bodily fluids or bodily pain. That's the kind of bodily.
I can live with that. Okay, so Bob Bodilli wrote this, fantastic, explanation on runes, right? Because Casey kind of gave us a bit of obscure information about it, But he did say one point which I thought was very interesting. He said, and this point is also relates to BRC20. He said, for instance, if you want to do an airdrop to more than 1,000 addresses, it's going to be super difficult, to do it. So that means that's one problem why, it's hard to scale maybe BRC20 and you have all these problems. And, that's not going to go away with runes, right? So imagine you want to do a token airdrop to 10,000 people, but you can only do 1,000. Now, on tap protocol, for instance, with Digbot, what we're actually doing, for instance, I'm making people inscribe, I want, this token, right? Digbot. And then the people who actually inscribe that inscription, which is an ordinal an inscription, we track them, and then those wallets get airdropped. So in that way, we're also getting rid of bots, because there's a lot of bot minting happening, even with the Sats mint, even with the bitmaps. Any token you can imagine that's going to come up on ordinals, there's going to be a lot of bots minting, and front running people. So I'm just saying, we already have some of the solutions, for instance, with the tap protocol, because I can airdrop 10,000 people with one inscription. You know what I'm saying? It saves the fees. It doesn't clog or congest the system. It does not contest BRC20. It actually extends functionality to BRC20. But in closing, I just want to say what we are seeing in the ordinal space is exciting in the sense that we have builder wars. We have people trying to vie for influence. They're trying to create, maybe cartels, right? Like the indexers, some people are already calling themselves the main indexers. You know what I'm saying? Like nobody can afford to call themselves a main index at this point because we're so early. Somebody could come up with an idea tomorrow, next week, or build on the idea which nobody's taking seriously, and this thing can become something. You know what I mean? So I'm pro experimentation, but at the end of the day, you know what I mean? May the best technology win. That's all I want to say, man.
Appreciate it.
Very, very well put. Builder wars, developer activity, right? Good for Bitcoin and the progression of, the technological advancement. Could be very harmful to the community and social layer that exists on it. Time will be told. We'll go on BZ and then Overlord.
Yeah, so I just noticed that you have pinned the tweet from Leon about BRC20 versus Runes is the perfect test to see what end users truly value. Runes is objectively a better technical implementations of fungible tokens on Bitcoin, but BRC20 has built up strong network effects with holders and developers, especially in Asia, and can evolve if needed. So I actually want to ask you, Bob, and maybe some of you others who have an opinion, what do you guys think? Will Runes actually overtake BRC20 in terms of market capitalization and builders building on it? And a question to Randy, since you're a representative of the Ordinals wallet. Would you be up for forking the Ordinals protocol?
Would we want to do it? No. Would we do it if we had to? Yes, I guess.
I guess an interesting thing would be like, what would
wow.
cause you to fork it? What would be a thing that would be powerful enough to fork?
Say it again.
What would be something that would cause you to want to fork it? What would be that kind of egregious where you were like, oh no, okay, we're gonna have to fork now?
I really wouldn't want to do it. Like it would have to be, removing inscription numbers is cause, is big enough, I would say. But like obviously somebody mentioned that's not what's happening. That's fine. No, I don't know. I don't even know if we would fork it or we would just keep running an older version because unless there's something of extreme importance that is needed in ordinals, we don't really have to upgrade. So we don't even have to fork it. We can just run an older version if we have to.
What about you, Bob? What's your take on the competition? Where are the social advances, and do you think it's beneficial, maybe long term, if BRC20 forks into its own meta protocol?
Yeah, I mean, regarding the Rune versus BRC20, my favorite comparison so far is if you look at the first 24 hours of BRC20, already completely minted out, and you had dozens of other tokens deployed. And in the first 24 hours of the more technically efficient protocol, Runes, granted, it's a blog post, we didn't have a spec, whatever, but we have maybe some tokens, TBD, because we don't really know. We don't have fair mint functionality like we do with BRC20. Of course, we could add that to the Rune spec. And so we might have some people with tokens, but we might not, and we don't really know whether that's the case or not. So there's something to be said about the simplicity of the BRC20 model in terms of, the most successful fungible token on Bitcoin of all time, hands down, compared to all the other token standards and put them all together, and it's still probably more successful. And so like we can critique BRC20 and obviously UTXO bloat is a real thing. And whether you agree that it's a problem or not, minimizing UTXO bloat is still probably a good thing. And so, yeah, I mean, that's kind of the Runes versus BRC20. In terms of like where BRC20 goes moving forward, or like the forkability of ORD, there are some dangers in forking ORD before like a 1.0 release. There's some merit to getting stability and coming together as a community and compromise and figuring things out. And that's, compromise is definitely the better option here. Anything that's gonna split the what is the word, unanimity, the unanimousness. I know that's not a word. Anything that's going to like divert this consensus that we currently have on indexing is going to be painful, very painful for the ecosystem. We've already seen in some cases where the indexers have diverged, and it's absolutely terrible user experience for users trying to navigate the ecosystem, having different numbers or having, cursed supported or not supported, and other things like that. So while forking is obviously possible and anyone could do it at any time, it feels like we should all try to stick together at least until 1.0. Give Casey some space, but also, get him to listen to community concerns and make sure that we're all okay with the direction things are going.
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking like, who of us, if we think about Rune, and I understand being the first person to mint a grouping of Rune tokens or whatever, but for the 5th mint, how many of us are going to buy some Rune tokens? Like, who's going to be interested in that, right? Because obviously if you can mint them, there's going to be the first day, once people figure out how to do it, there's going to be hundreds or thousands minted. And so I mint them. Who's going to want my mint Rune tokens.
Your Atom token on Rune.
Yeah, my number 115 on the list. Like, where's the value of those? Being that it's not a kind of free mint, it's not a public mint. It's just I mint them and now I get to distribute them. It's going to be interesting to see how this plays out.
Yeah, I think so as well. Overlord, what is on your mind, bro?
No, you guys are making all the points that are floating around in my head all over. And first of all, we should all definitely try to stick together, make it positive, give people time to think, and don't, put too much pressure. So I agree with all that. But also when Nilly Coins was talking and we talked about colored tokens and rare Pepes, I still have mine from Counterparty, but you guys are hitting it on the head. When that came out, I minted Rooster Teeth, and Rooster Teeth was my token. Of course, no one gave a shit but me and my 3 poker buddies who were using it to settle up between each other, right? We just thought we were geeks. We thought Counterparty was fun. Yep. And the 2 things that brings to my mind is scalability. I remember the colored tokens and the rare Pepes, the transactions got pretty expensive during the bull run, and it kind of just wasn't worth it to move or engage with them at some point. Plus, Counterparty had their own token built in, which I think turned off a lot of the Bitcoin maxis, or they weren't really called that at the time, but the Bitcoin guys that might have gone in with it more if they didn't feel like it was a shit coin. And I just want to know, from the tech side up here, if everyone thinks, the scalability issues might be the same as with the original colored tokens. And then from an adoptability side, is it gonna be better without its own sort of token for gas? Is that gonna give it a better shot than the Counterparty stuff? Just opinions.
Bob, do you have any opinions on that? I'm going to lean on you for a little bit of the tech expertise.
Yeah, I mean, I think broadly in terms of the trust assumptions, all of these fit into meta protocols. Meta protocols, which basically they use Bitcoin for their data availability. In many cases, 100% of the data will be stored on Bitcoin, like is the case with Counterparty or Ordinals or Stamps or BRC20 or Runes. They all rely on indexers. These are off-chain indexers. And it's a little bit different than like a Bitcoin node because Bitcoin actually has consensus and can reject invalid transactions. Whereas, we could do a PSBT and the BRC20 indexer could lie, and then you actually get fake BRC20, but your PSBT went through because it was a valid PSBT. So a little bit more centralization here, but pretty similar trust assumptions across the board. I would say that BRC20 being built on ordinals is kind of an annoying dependency because ordinals upgrades now can impact BRC20 state. And so, Runes has the advantage of not being based on ordinals, so fewer dependencies means a little bit more of a efficient, elegant implementation. I'm still not convinced on storing it in the op return. Op return is limited to I think 83 bytes, depending on the version of the Bitcoin software you're running. 83 bytes means you could send to a couple people per transaction, and then you're going to run out of bytes. So either you find miners and pools that are going to accept those transactions, or you just get tons of adoption on Runes to the point where it would be silly for miners to reject all of these transactions with non-standard op return size. So yeah, from a technical perspective, I think that's probably the summary. I think Runes has a big uphill battle to get adoption, because you essentially need all the infrastructure and the developer support in order to make a successful meta protocol. So that means indexers, that means open source code, that means an actual spec, a reference implementation. You need multiple people agreeing on the correct implementation, and then you need wallet support and marketplace support and integrations into other applications. And so, I mean, who has the incentive to do something like that? Like maybe there are some teams that can get some additional market share in the fungible token space on Bitcoin by building out that tooling. but BRC20 has a lot of, I mean, it's a huge head start in terms of all of the development work going on the BRC20 side. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see. I don't know how much weight Casey's ideas have independent of market forces.
Well, I mean, the reality is that the users came, right? And then all the developers followed the users, like ordinals and stuff. There was a massive interest from the user base, the collectors. And that drove wallets and marketplaces and all this. Like with Rune, how's that going to happen? Right?
It's backwards a little bit. Yeah.
It's backwards. It's like, you know, if we're collectors and we're, or whatever, we're degens and we just want to, you know, do some shit coins. Like, I just don't see the mechanism by which, you know, every person in this space is going to be able to make their own shit coin. Okay, great. Who's going to want to trade them, buy them and sell them? Where's going to be that impetus for teams to want to build marketplaces, wallets, and all the rest of it? I don't know. It just vibes 12 hours in. Don't give me that feel that like there's going to be this tremendous movement towards it. Like, I think the idea is there, but if all that infrastructure needs to be built, it's going to be tough.
Yeah, Adam, we've kind of seen this, you know, through the Emblem Vault lens a handful of times. When a new protocol emerges, right, new assets are created. And then what's needed when the new assets are created is you need a wallet to store them, and then you need a marketplace to trade them on. Yep. This is what happened, right, with ordinals, where the assets were created, and then people were doing OTC. Then Emblem came in, and then the marketplaces and wallets and everything popped up afterwards. It seems like here it's the opposite, where the infrastructure is going to be built first, and then people are going to ape into it afterwards. Where I feel like in this, you know, kind of authentic but clunky way of the early days of when a protocol is created, when people are trying to go to Discord to trade these type of assets, I feel like that's where the community is built. That's where the social reinforcement comes from. Yep. This is taking a little bit more of kind of an Ethereum approach to where you're putting the tech and everything down first and then having people go play afterwards. So it's going to take a different type of social coordination, at least from talking through this, compared to some of the other things we've seen on Bitcoin.
Agreed.
So should be interesting to say the least, but we've been going at this now for 2 hours. Feels like everyone's out of questions. I know this conversation is probably going to get beat to death until 2 days from now. Casey posts another controversial take to then get everyone's attention off of this so that we could go focus on something else. A lot of things in the air to be determined, right? Like, how is Domo going to respond to this? How are all the other infrastructure companies that support BRC20 going to respond? I know there's already a handful of teams, including Ordinal's Wallet, who are working on Rune support. I know of specifically one more that I've talked with. Right? How are some of these? How is Unisat going to respond to this with their funding? Are they going to support Rune? Or are they going to say we're solely BRC20? You've seen, you know, the TAP protocol and many of them basically say we're going forward with BRC20 and TAP. We're not moving into Rune. So a lot more conversations to be had to see where this social consensus goes. Adam, you disappeared on me, but
man, you know what? I tell you what, it's hot here in Costa Rica today, bro. Because like my camera. Hold on a second.
Jesus, disappearing on me 24/7.
Camera is like it's overheating, bro. It's like it can't take the heat today. So yeah, it's just like turning off. I mean, that one I've reset it twice now, and obviously it's like in overheat mode, so it's dying on me. But anyway, good stuff today. Yeah, we're going to be talking about this. Obviously, I think there's a not financial advice space later today. You know, Ordinal's show tomorrow. We're going to be on tomorrow. So yeah, this is definitely going to be hot topic for the next few days at least.
Hot topic. Yeah, for those that don't know, make sure you give everyone on the stage a follow. Give me, myself, and Emblem Vault. We hosted this space Tuesday through Thursday, 11:30 a.m. Eastern time until whenever it really ends. So we'll be back at this tomorrow, Thursday. TO's talking today. I think Casey has a space at 1 p.m. today regarding the inscription numbers. A lot of spicy stuff, and we'll see you guys tomorrow.
Thanks, guys.